Hare Krishna. So as I mentioned earlier, today we will be speaking about Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur because it is his auspicious disappearance day anniversary today. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is a pure devotee of the Lord, an intimate associate, a great Acharya, who rendered very, very great contributions to the world, specifically through the medium of his books, his commentaries. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is best known amongst the devotee community for his prolific writings, specifically his commentaries on the works of the previous Acharyas. For example, he wrote commentaries on many of Srila Rupa Goswami's works, like the Ujjvala Nilamani, the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, and he also wrote commentaries on books like the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which he could not complete. Then also on the Brahma Samhita, on the Gopal Tapani Upanishad, and so on. So apart from the many commentaries that he wrote on the different works, the different scriptures and the books of the different Acharyas, he also composed many original works like the Prem Samputa, Raghavartama Chandrika, and so on. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was really a great scholar, in addition to being a very, very great and pure devotee of the Lord. He came at a time that was somewhat in between the time of Mahaprabhu's immediate followers and the modern period. The immediate followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were the 6 Goswamis who lived in Vrindavan. And then after them came Acharyas like Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and also the trinity of Srinivas Acharya, Narottam Das Thakur, and Shyamananda Pandit. Now after this period, after these 3, right up to the modern period, which means up to the time of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, there was a big gap. Now, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is acknowledged to be the main guardian and the principal teacher of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya in this period. Of course, his Shiksha disciple Baladev Vidyabhushan also made very significant contributions. But principally, it is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur who is considered the mainstay of the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition in this period. When you look at the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, Srila Prabhupada at the end of that introduction lists out our Guru Parampara. And he mentions Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur next after Narottam Das Thakur. Now we should note that this parampara that is mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in the introduction of Bhagavad Gita is essentially a Shiksha parampara. It is a list of the great Acharyas in terms of the Shiksha connection, not necessarily always Diksha, although in some cases there was also Diksha. But there is also Diksha line for Narottam Das Thakur. So in this list, Srila Prabhupada has basically mentioned the prominent names. So it is described that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Diksha Guru was Radha Raman Chakravarti, who was also a great Vaishnava. Radha Raman Chakravarti was a disciple of another great Vaishnava whose name was Krishna Charan Chakravarti. Krishna Charan Chakravarti was in turn the disciple of another great Acharya, whose name was Ganga Narayan Chakravarti. Now this Ganga Narayan Chakravarti, another exalted soul, was a disciple of Narottam Das Thakur, who was a disciple of Lokanath Swami, Lokanath Goswami in Vrindavan. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur himself has given this parampara in his commentaries in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is most famous for his two commentaries. One on the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is called the Sarartha Darshini, and the Bhagavad Gita, which is called Sarartha Varshini. And they are very often quoted by devotees. Srila Prabhupada also mentions or quotes from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentaries often, sometimes mentioning his name and sometimes not mentioning his name. So these two commentaries especially are very prominent and famous. So in his Sarartha Darshini commentary, when he speaks about the Rasa Leela, the Rasa Panchadhyaya, the 5 chapters of the 10th canto, chapters 29 to 33, that deal with the Rasa Leela, there he mentions his own disciplic succession. That is how we come to know from the most authoritative source as to how Narottam Das Thakur was actually connected to Vishwanath Chakravarti was connected to Narottam Das Thakur. So therefore it turns out that he was in the 4th generation from Narottam Das Thakur. So his works and his commentaries show that he was not only a great scholar but also a great devotee. Speaking of his commentaries, one book that he wrote was a commentary on the Ujjvala Neelamani of Rupa Goswami, which he called Ujjvala Neelamani Kiran. Kiran means a ray. You see, when a devotee writes a commentary on the works of the previous Acharyas, so he indicates very clearly that I'm incapable of really commenting on the entirety of this book. It is so vast. It is so deep. I can only give a glimpse. That is the etiquette. The commentator never thinks that he has understood everything in its entirety, so he gives just a glimpse. Just like even when Mahaprabhu talks to Rupa Goswami in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says the ocean of devotional service is without length and breadth and depth. You can't estimate that. But I can give you only a drop. So this is the etiquette. This is how we understand it. So when Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments on the Ujjvala Neelamani, he calls his commentary as a ray. One ray only. If Ujjvala Neelamani is like a sun, then this commentary is just one ray of that sun. So Ujjvala Neelamani Kirana. Rupa Goswami's next famous book was the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also wrote a commentary on this book. And what did he call it? Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu. Bindu means a drop. Again, he took the humble position that I can't really convey the meaning of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in its entirety, but I can just give a glimpse, like a drop. Bindu means a drop. And then he took a third book of Rupa Goswami, the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, and he commented on that, and he called the commentary as Bhagavatamrita Kana. Kana means particle. So therefore, Kirana, Bindu, Kana, 18 Vaishnava Pana. There is a saying amongst Gaudiya Vaishnavas like that. That when we have Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Kirana, Bindu, and the Kana, that is when we have the ray, the particle, the drop and the particle, then the Gaudiya Vaishnavas get great transcendental joy. And actually that when one reads these 3 books, one actually becomes a Vaishnava. So these three books, the ray, the drop and the particle, are what makes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also famous amongst the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur got the title Chakravarti, as did his spiritual master and his grand spiritual master and so on. The title Chakravarti is fairly common, or used to be fairly common, amongst Brahmanas who were renowned for their scholarship. Literally speaking, the word Chakra and Varti, Chakravarti, means he around whom a chakra or a circle or an assembly turns. In other words, he who is the most prominent, who resides within and is the most prominent amongst an assembly of extraordinary people, of great scholars. In other words, the greatest of all scholars, a scholar amongst all scholars, the king of all scholars. But when you apply it to pure devotees of the Lord, then what we mean is that he who resides within and who is the most prominent in an assembly of Shuddha Bhaktas, of pure devotees of the Lord. Another meaning is given by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur to his name, Vishwanath Chakravarti. He says that he who reveals the transcendental joy of devotion to Vishwanath, that is Krishna, the Lord of the universe, and who expands the circle of bhakti, is Vishwanath Chakravarti. So this is an understanding of his name that is given by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was born in a village called Devagram in Nadia district, the same district where Mayapur is located. Not much is known about his family, except that his father's name was Radharaman Bhattacharya. He had two brothers. Mother's name is not known. And from childhood, he exhibited a very sharp, keen intellect. He picked up his studies very, very quickly. He was brilliant as a child. He mastered all that his teachers had to teach him in the Gurukul. And not only that, he also exhibited renunciation and detachment from family life right from childhood. So his father became a little alarmed, witnessing these symptoms, so he got him married off very early. That was a tradition in the Vedic times, that they would get married very early. In fact, sometimes they would get married much before they even attained puberty, like 6 years, 7 years. The girls would get married when they were 5 years old. But they wouldn't go to their husband's house till they attained puberty. They would live with the father and mother. And then they would be sent to the husband's house. So the boys also would sometimes get married very early when they were 9 or 10 years old. But they would not see their wife even sometimes till they became old enough. And sometimes, even till today, in some of the interior villages in India, in some states like Uttar Pradesh, you may find this happening. One time I remember many years ago, there was one man, I don't know if I narrated this incident here in the manner, he took interest in Krishna consciousness. And he became so inspired that he wanted to become a brahmachari. And then he was just a student. He was probably in high school or something like that. Maybe 16 years, 15 years old or something. And so I said, you finish your studies and then we can see. There's no tearing hurry. You should have some basic education at least. And then he said, I have a question. It's fine. I will wait for another 2 or 3 years and finish my high school and then I can come. But I have a problem. I said, what is the problem? He said, I'm married already. So I said, really? How old are you? He said, I'm 14 years old. 14 years old and you're married? He said, yeah, I was married 8 years ago. My jaw dropped even more. I said, 8 years ago you were married? He said, yes. In our village we have this custom. So then what should I do? Now I'm a married person, so can I become a brahmachari? So I said, wait, let's take one thing at a time. You just become a nice devotee first. Then we'll see about everything. So it was a custom in the villages in India in the old days. So apparently Vishwanath Chakravarti's father also, being anxious that this boy would run away from home in search of God, got him married. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was really very detached. But in order to pursue his education, he had to go to another place. So he left his village, Devagram, and went to another place called Sayyadabad, in another district of Bengal. And there he learnt under his guru many, many important things about Krishna consciousness. It is said that it is when he was here in Sayyadabad, still learning Vaishnava Shastras, that he composed the Kirana, Bindu and the Kana. The ray, the drop and the particle. These three commentaries that he actually wrote so early on in his life, even as a very young man who was studying under his guru, as technically not a brahmachari, but living like a brahmachari in the ashram. And then soon after, he left for Vrindavan. It is said that because he had not been interested in married life anyway, but he had already been married, so he went to his wife and he stayed there, and he actually taught her the Bhagavatam, and he made her a devotee, and he inculcated in her heart such a taste in the Srimad Bhagavatam that she gave her consent to his going away to Vrindavan. But the parents were not so enthused about the idea. So they tried on many occasions to convince him and to persuade him to stay on, but they were unsuccessful. Eventually Vishwanath Chakravarti left home and went to Vrindavan. And there he, being tremendously inspired by the example of the 6 Goswamis, resided there, lived a life of austerity and scholarship and devotion. He went to the banks of the Radha Kund, to the Bhajan Kutir of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. How many of you have been to Radha Kund, to Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's Bhajan Kutir? Yes. So you would have seen Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Bhajan Kutir also over there. So he went to that place and he stayed there. There was one disciple of Kaviraj called Mukunda Das who was looking after the premises. So he was happy to accommodate Vishwanath Chakravarti, who stayed there. And it is here that he began to even further deeply study the books of the Goswamis. He also began his writings, continued his writings. He also performed very staunch sadhana. He was chanting, and his austerities also were quite severe. So he lived there for quite a long time. It was here that he was writing his commentaries on the Srimad Bhagavatam and everything. It so happened that there was one Vaishnava whose name was Rup Kaviraj, and he started to present a distorted version of Mahaprabhu's teaching. Specifically, he was preaching a distorted version of Raganuga Bhakti. And what he said was basically that, number one, only renunciants can initiate. In other words, he said that no householder can be an Acharya or can be a guru. And the second thing he said was that in the pursuit or pursuance of Raganuga Bhakti, one need not hear and chant about the Lord. One can simply do smaran, remembrance of the Lord's pastimes. One need not come to the association of devotees to hear and chant about the Lord. One can just sit in isolation and remember the pastimes of the Lord. So, the daughter of Srinivas Acharya, whose name was Hemalata Thakurani, she was a great Acharya herself. She was a great exalted soul. So she actually excommunicated Rup Kaviraj from the assembly of Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because what he was propagating was not in accordance with the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Actually, Rup Kaviraj started an Apasampradaya, which is called the Atibari sect, the Atibari Upasampradaya. You know that Bhakti Vinod Thakur identified many, many deviant sects amongst the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Those who claim to be Gaudiya Vaishnavas or followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but actually distorted Mahaprabhu's teachings. Like the Prakrita Sahajiyas, the Aulas, the Baulas, the Karta Bhajas, the Sahajiyas, so many of them. So the Atibaris are one of them. So Rupa Kaviraj was the founder Acharya of the Atibari deviant sect. So Hemalata Thakurani actually expelled him from the association of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So these things are always going to happen when you have philosophy, when you have the pure teachings. There will always be some people who speculate and concoct and so on. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he commented on this extensively in the third canto, in his commentary, the Sarartha Darshini on the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and extensively refuted this Atibari sect conclusion of Rupa Kaviraj. And he established that the ashram is not important for someone to become an acharya. One must basically become a pure devotee of the Lord, and then regardless of one's ashram, one can become an acharya. On the contrary, if someone is even born from a Goswami family, but if it doesn't exhibit the qualities of devotion, then one cannot consider him as an acharya. So in this way, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur established also clearly the conclusions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In Vrindavan, Vishwanath Chakravarti lived for many, many years like this. And when he was very old, he was so old that he was practically not in external consciousness, but he used to be absorbed in devotional consciousness. At that time, there was a crisis that took place in Jaipur. Maharaja Jai Singh, who had become very favorable to the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, was distracted in this faith by the Ramanandis, a sister or another, some kind of a derivation from the Ramanuja sect, but not strictly following Ramanuja. So these Ramanandis went up to the king and said that these Gaudiya Vaishnavas are not bona fide because they don't have a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. And they also believe in Radharani, and Radharani is not even married to Krishna. There's no mention of all this. So they had many complaints. And they managed to disturb the mind of the king sufficiently. And the king sent word to Vishwanath Chakravarti, who was the leader of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas at that time in Vrindavan. And he said, please come here and defend your case against the objections that these Ramanandis are doing. But Vishwanath was too old to travel. And he was relishing too much of transcendental bliss in his old age. He couldn't move. So he sent his foremost Shiksha disciple, Baladev Vidyabhushan, to go. That, of course, is a historical pastime which can be narrated on perhaps Baladev Vidyabhushan's disappearance day. And then Baladev Vidyabhushan, with the blessings of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, went there, and he was challenged to write a commentary, which he did in a very short time by the blessings of Govinda Dev in Jaipur. And everyone finally had to accept that the Gaudiya Vaishnavas were bona fide. Such was the persuasive arguments and the purity of Baladev Vidyabhushan being empowered by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So this was a very, very important contribution of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. There is also one very interesting pastime about Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that is narrated by the Acharya himself in one of his works, which is called the Mantrartha Deepika. And it pertains to a certain section of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Madhya Leela chapter 21, when Mahaprabhu is narrating to Sanatana Goswami the opulence and sweetness of Krishna. And at this time, he compares Krishna to 24 and a half moons. How many of you have heard of this concept of comparing Krishna to moons? Yes? His face is like a moon. Yes? So Krishna is considered as 24 and a half moons. Can anyone try to guess what the 24 and a half moons are in Krishna's body? Yes. 10 fingernails, correct? 10 toenails, that's 20, straight. Out of 24 and a half, you got 20. The face, the complete face is one moon. That's 21. 2 eyes, no. The 2 cheeks actually, not the 2 eyes. So Krishna's 2 cheeks are also considered full moons. So that's 23. The dot of sandalwood on the forehead is another full moon. So that's 24. And the portion of the forehead that is below the dot, that is the half moon. So Kaviraj Goswami defines it like this here. In text, in Madhya Leela chapter 21, text number 125. Kama Gayatri Mantra Rupa Hoy Krishna Rasva Rupa Sardha Chabbish Akshara Tara Hoy Shei Akshara Chandra Hoy Krishna Kori Udaya Trijagata Koila Kama Moy. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is identical with the Vedic hymn known as the Kama Gayatri, which is composed of 24 and a half syllables. Those syllables are compared to moons that arise in Krishna. Thus all 3 worlds are filled with desire. So Krishna's body, transcendental body, is compared to the Kama Gayatri mantra. So all those devotees who have taken second initiation, you know what this Kama Gayatri mantra is, because we chant it every day, 3 times a day. The Kama Gayatri mantra is the last mantra that we chant. Amongst all the mantras, the Gayatri mantras that we chant. So Krishna's transcendental body is compared to the Kama Gayatri mantra. And Krishna's transcendental body is also compared to 24 and a half full moons, because the Kama Gayatri mantra has 24 and a half syllables. And then Kaviraj Goswami goes on to explain the 24 and a half moons of Krishna. The toenails, the fingernails, the face, the dot on the forehead, the 2 cheeks, and the space under the dot. Now, Kaviraj Goswami, I beg your pardon, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was reading this, and he began to think, Krishna's face is 24 and a half moons, I can understand. But the Kama Gayatri mantra, how is that 24 and a half syllables? Which is the half syllable? I have never heard of this concept of a half syllable anywhere. So he was thinking that this Kama Gayatri mantra is the most important mantra for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because it reveals Radha and Krishna. And if I don't understand this mantra properly and chant it properly, the deity of the mantra will not manifest to me. Radha Krishna will not be revealed to me. So I must understand this mantra properly. But I have never heard of a half a syllable. So he looked up, of course, although he was already an accomplished scholar, he started examining all the books on grammar, Sanskrit grammar. He couldn't find anything mentioning a half syllable. He looked up books on various other aspects of Sanskrit literature, the ornaments of language and everything, but nowhere could he find anything. When he was thinking that the last letter, which is a fragmented T, ta, he said, if that is the half syllable, then Kaviraj Goswami is guilty of the fault of disorder. So it can't be that. And then he looked up the Radhika Sahasranam Stotra in the Brihad Naradiya Purana. And there also it is stated that Srimati Radharani is Panchas means 50 actually. Akshara Rupini. So she is the personified form of 50 syllables. So there's no mention of half a syllable anywhere. So being unsuccessful, he was thinking, my life is unsuccessful now. What is the point in living if I cannot understand this transcendental mystery? So he said, let me go to Radha Kund, I'll sit there and give up my life. So he was there on the banks of Radha Kund, and he was trying to think, what is the meaning of Kaviraj? Is Kaviraj Goswami wrong? Has he made a mistake? But no, he is a transcendental personality. He's one of the eternal associates of Krishna, blessed directly by Mahaprabhu. How can he be wrong? On the other hand, there is nothing like a half syllable anywhere. So he was sitting on the bank of the Radha Kund meditating, and then he fell into a swoon. In the second half of the night, Srimati Radharani personally appeared to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in a dream. And she said, my dear Vishwanath, my dear Hari Vallabha. Another name of Vishwanath was Hari Vallabha. It was often his pen name. When he would compose songs and other works, he would sometimes sign as Hari Vallabha. It is a practice of authors, not just in the Sanskrit tradition, but also in other traditions, that authors use pen names. So Vishwanath Chakravarti sometimes used the pen name Hari Vallabha. So Radharani said, O Vishwanath, O Hari Vallabha, do not be in any doubt and anxiety. This Kama Gayatri mantra is not different from me. By understanding this Kama Gayatri mantra, you can understand me and my beloved Prana Vallabha Krishna. And do not doubt that Kaviraj Goswami has made a mistake. He is directly blessed by me. So there is no question of mistake on his part. You look at this book called Varna Gamabhasvat, and there you will see the truth revealed. The grammatical rule by which a half syllable is identified is mentioned there. Kaviraj Goswami actually studied that book before he wrote this. So, the syllable V, we can't of course speak out the Kama Gayatri mantra, but the syllable V, when it follows the syllable Ya, is considered a half syllable. So, the hint was given by Radharani to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to refer to that book. The next morning he woke in great ecstasy, shouting out the names of Srimati Radharani on Radha Kund. But then he restrained his ecstasy because he had to follow her order first. Service first and ecstasy later. Right? That's the principle. When Rukmini Devi was fanning Krishna in Dwarka, she developed such ecstatic symptoms that she couldn't barely fan Krishna. The fan was falling off and she was falling off. Then she controlled herself, because she realized that service to Krishna is more important than my own individual ecstasies. So anyway, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur controlled himself and he rushed to find this book. He found it. And then he found this part about the V and the Ya. And then the mystery was solved. And he was relieved. His life was saved. And then he meditated, and eventually it is described, he got the mercy of the deity of this, the personified deity of this mantra. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was very satisfied now that he had solved the mystery of this Kama Gayatri mantra having 24 and a half syllables. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur later on started the temple of Radha Gokulananda in Vrindavan. So that's another reason I wanted to talk about Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur today. We have Radha Gokulananda here also. Actually, where the Radha Gokulananda temple in Vrindavan is today, there was another temple existing, that is the temple of Radha Vinod. Radha Vinod were the deities of Lokanath Goswami, one of the first of Mahaprabhu's associates to come to Vrindavan. Lokanath and Bhugarbha Goswamis came to Vrindavan even before Rupa and Sanatan. So Lokanath Goswami worshipped the deity of Krishna, who was Radha Vinod, and there was no Radharani there. Radharani was brought by Janava Mataji later. So there was Radha Vinod, and in the place where Lokanath Goswami did his bhajan, there was a small temple of Radha Vinod was built, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur came there later on, and he had his deities of Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda. He also worshipped them there. Later, the temple of Radha Vinod fell into disrepair, and out of fear of the Muslims, the original deity of Radha Vinod was shifted to Jaipur. So the deity of Radha Gokulananda remained there with Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and he built another temple at the same site, and that became known as the Radha Gokulananda temple. So both the Radha Vinod temple and Gokulananda temple actually at the same site. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur then worshipped his beloved deities there. He moved to Vrindavan, he lived there, and he also departed from the world, from his manifest pastimes at the Radha Gokulananda Mandir. So there you will find the samadhis of Lokanath Goswami and also of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Narottam Das Thakur. These three samadhis are there in the temple, for those of you who have visited Radha Gokulananda Mandir in Vrindavan. So it was on this day that he departed. The exact birth year and the passing away year, there is some difference of opinion amongst various scholars, but be that as it may, the appearance of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was at least 150 years after the appearance of Mahaprabhu. And he may have lived for about 70 years approximately. So in his passing, the Gaudiya Vaishnava community lost a great stalwart. But fortunately for the sake of the Sampradaya, he had left behind one great Shiksha disciple, Baladev Vidyabhushan, who continued that tradition. So today is the disappearance day of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So we can pray at his lotus feet that he can bless us with a ray, a drop, or a particle of the pure devotion that he possesses for Sri Sri Radha and Gokulananda. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?